I got the Italian map and my Italian immigrant grandparents, and that's about it. But that's a lot. That's why I'm here.
Okay. People are officially joining us.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We're just going to wait a couple more seconds while folks join the lobby. So thank you for your patience. Okay, well, I think we should probably get started. How's everyone feeling? Looking good? Great. So good evening, everyone, and thank you all for logging in tonight. This is a fireside Zoom with Congressman Panetta, a virtual event that was made possible through a partnership with Kaiser Permanente, Lookout Santa Cruz, and the Santa Cruz County Business Council. My name is Robert Singleton, and I'm here to welcome you all and go over some quick housekeeping items. So first of all, this evening is meant to be more of a cordial back and forth between Lookouts Wallace Bain and Congressman Panetta. So unfortunately, we will not be taking questions from the audience. However, you may still contribute comments and have a discussion with others by using the chat feature, though we ask that you treat each other with civility and respect. This event is being recorded and will be available for viewing at Lookout Santa Cruz afterward. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce one of our event partners, Sam Bajaj of Kaiser Permanente, for some brief remarks. A little bit about Sam. Sam is an experienced healthcare leader with a passion for innovation and transformation. He's driven by a desire to make quality and affordable healthcare accessible to all. He takes pride in building teams and fostering a working environment that will allow these teams to thrive and reach for that vision. Sam grew up in India and Chicago and started his professional life as an attorney at the U.S. Federal Trade Commission in Washington, D.C., where he led antitrust enforcement actions in the healthcare industry. He currently serves as the Chief Operating Officer for Kaiser Permanente's San Jose service area, which includes San Jose and Santa Cruz. While not at work, Sam enjoys volunteering and giving back to the community, and he and his wife, Seema, live in San Mateo with their dog, Charlie Brown. Sam?
Hey, thanks, Robert, for that kind introduction, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this fireside chat. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the folks that will be headlining this evening. But before we get to that, just real quick, as Robert mentioned, my name is Sam Bajaj. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Kaiser Permanente, Santa Cruz and San Jose. And it has been our honor and pleasure to be able to serve the folks in Santa Cruz County for the past 5 years. We're going to our 5th year this year, and just had amazing year-over-year growth, as well as bringing great quality healthcare and affordable healthcare to the folks of Santa Cruz County, as we have done in Santa Clara County, as well as other areas that we've been in. And of course, as always, as part of KP's mission, we are vested in community health and making sure that not only do we serve the members of KP, but we also serve the rest of the communities from a broader perspective so that we can raise the tide for all the boats that are in there. Now, that said, let me shift gears to the main event. So I want to welcome and thank our distinguished guests, Congressman Jimmy Panetta, and our moderator, Wallace Bain, for being here with us today. We are looking forward to having a fireside chat with Congressman Panetta, but before we get started, it is my honor to share some background with you about our guests. Congressman Panetta serves as California's 20th Congressional District and in the U.S. House of Representatives. His district includes Monterey, San Benito counties, parts of Santa Cruz, and Santa Clara counties. Now, he grew up in the central coast of California. Congressman Panetta understands the importance of giving back to the community and the country that gave him and his family so much. Now, during his time in Congress, he has fought for immigration reform, the protection of our coastline, affordable and accessible health care, our agriculture industry, its farmers and farm workers, our veterans, and many other priorities. Prior to being sworn in Congress, Congressman Panetta served as Deputy District Attorney for Monterey County. In his role, he served to bring justice for victims, protect families, and make our communities safer. In 2007, Congressman Panetta volunteered for active duty and was deployed to Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. He worked with Special Forces units and was awarded the Bronze Star Upon returning home, he focused on ending homelessness and improving resources for his fellow veterans and their families. He has been instrumental in opening Monterey County's first Veterans Treatment Court to ensure veterans receive the services that they have earned. He also established the Central Coast Veterans Cemetery on the former Fort Ord. Mr. Panetta was named Monterey County Veteran of the Year in 2015. Congressman Panetta, we are grateful to you for your service, for our community, and for the work that you've done on behalf of our country.
Thank you,
Also
Sam.
joining us today is Wallace Bain from Lookout, our community's well-known commentator on all things Santa Cruz. Mr. Bain launched his full-time journalism career on a day that Santa Cruzans will never forget. It was October 17, 1989, the day the Loma Prieta earthquake destroyed much of downtown. Now, he joined the Santa Cruz Sentinel in 1991 and established himself quickly as an authoritative voice on music, movies, local art and entertainment, and the daily Santa Cruz life. Now, his interviews, profiles and features form a living archive of recent memory. He has written 4 books and led Gail Rich Awards over the past 22 years. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Jimmy Panetta and Mr. Wallace Bain.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. It is my great honor to be with U.S. Representative Jimmy Panetta. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
You bet, Wallace. Thank you. It's good to be here on a beautiful Friday, early Friday evening after a long 2 weeks in which I've been out and about in the district. But I got to tell you, it's weeks like this where I'm out of Washington, here at home with my family, with my constituents, that really re-energizes me for when I have to go back to DC and kind of continue that legislative fight and slog that we're going through right now. But I got to tell you, I think we're feeling the sense that I got out there in the district has been pretty interesting, in that you're starting to feel that people here on the Central Coast are starting to get that little bit of control in their lives. They're getting the vaccine, they're getting control, and they're starting to see what can be and what should have been, unfortunately, over this past year. So it's a good thing, and look forward to obviously continuing my work in the district in DC, but also tonight having a little conversation with you. So thank you, Wallace. I appreciate that.
I was kind of hoping you were in Washington, D.C. so I could gloat about the California weather, but I can't do that because you're right in it. You know exactly how sweet it is here today.
Yeah, well, unlike you as a wall in the background, I at least show a little bit of sunlight over here behind me.
I wanted to start by asking you a little bit the nature of your job, sort of going back years a little bit. And let me ask it like this. Let's say there was a weird a reality game show in which your dad, Leon Panetta, ex-White House Chief of Staff, ex-Secretary of Defense, ex-CIA chief, and before that, the congressman in this district for many years, that your dad was brought out of retirement to do your job for a week, okay? So what would happen? Would it, and please answer A or B here, okay? So A, would he find that, okay, some of the names are a little different, but it's just like riding a bicycle. He can just go right in there and figure it out? Or B, would he call you up and say, Jimmy, dude, you gotta take this back. I can't figure out what's up and what's down. I mean, how has it changed since Leon was in Congress?
Look, my father stopped serving back in 1992. And we all know everything that has gone on in not just Congress, but in our country since then. So I guarantee you the answer to that, and yes, the final answer is B. He would get there and go, what the hell is going on? And I say that not just because of my discussions with him now. I say that because I remember before I got into Congress, I remember he told me one time that he had a dream, and that he basically woke up and he was in Congress. And mind you, this was in the 2000s. early 2000s. And he woke up and he was in Congress. And I remember he basically said that it was a nightmare for him of how, considering how different it was getting back in there, or at least thinking he was back in Congress even at that time, which is much different even at this time. I think, I think what I saw, and I was fortunate enough to intern in DC back in the early 90s, back in college, where I, sort of got to travel around with him and have dinner with him. After I'd interned at the State Department, I'd beat feet up to Capitol Hill and have dinner with him and all of his colleagues. And it definitely was a different atmosphere that I see from back then to now. In that, back then it was just sort of normal that you worked with people, and not just Democrats, but obviously Republicans. And it was sort of the trust was automatically there. The benefit of the doubt was automatically there. And therefore, it was just a given that you were going to work with Republicans as a Democrat and Republicans with Democrats. Now, unfortunately, you get there and it's automatically given, unfortunately, and it's actually a lot easier to just remain in your trenches, to just kind of play partisan warfare, unfortunately. And it takes that extra effort to be bipartisan, to be frank. And look, in me, in this district, which has definitely turned more blue since my father was in there, you admit that, but also, more decline to states as well. You realize that, sure, I could be that member that could easily just vote the party line, do my constituent services, get reelected, and keep on doing it. And it was funny. Another story from my dad. There was one time when I was talking to a member, I was running for Congress in 2016, and I was speaking to a member, a fellow California Democrat, and he said, you know what, Jimmy, it's easy to be an average Congress member here. And I said, what do you mean by? I was dumbfounded. I said, what do you mean by that? And I really was surprised because look, we here on the Central Coast have had above average representation, be it at the state capitol in Sacramento or in congressmen with the representation of Sam Farr and the other guy before him. And so I was kind of surprised. What do you mean by being average? You don't come here to be average. What do you mean? And he said what I just said. He said, look, you can come here, you can vote the party line, you go home, you politic at home, you get reelected, and you just kind of float along. And so I was like dumbfounded by that statement. I couldn't believe he would say that. So I went back and of course I said, hey, Dad, some guy told me it's easy to be an average Congress member. And right away, my dad starts laughing. And Wallace, the laugh that he has. That's the type of belly laugh that he gave me. And I was like, and he said to me, of course it is. Of course it is. But then he said something that resonates with me today. And he said, you know what, though? It's fun when you get stuff done. Now, he used another S word that my dad likes to use, but he says it's fun when you get stuff done. And that's really what it's about. You got to get stuff done, and it takes a lot of work to do it. And and especially if you want to do it in a bipartisan fashion. And that's why I make that extra effort to be a part of several bipartisan caucuses, because I do feel it's that relationship building, that trust building that you have to have in Congress. And I believe in life in order to get things done. And so I think it would be much more different for my father to come back in Congress, but knowing my dad, he could still probably get the job done.
Now, you were first elected to Congress in 2016, and I can't remember who was elected president that year. It's coming to me, but I think that means this last couple of months is the first time that you have served in Congress with the White House and the Senate from your own party. That has to make a big difference in your day-to-day life, does it?
Oh man, you don't know. I was talking about this last night with a friend. And when we first took the helm in 2017, in January 2017, you could only imagine the calls that we were getting to our office. I mean, thousands upon thousands each week of people literally with their hair on fire asking that question, that inevitable question, what can we do? What can we do? And it was so understandable because that's how everybody felt back then. I know you don't like to think about it, but you do remember what it's been like for the past 4 years. Unfortunately, we can't forget it at this point. Hopefully we do soon, especially with the good work that's happening.
Especially those first couple of months.
Oh my goodness, exactly. And so it really became a practice of of like how, like, oh, do we react to everything this son of a gun does? Because as you know, it was a tweet, it was a statement, it was a destructive executive order, it was a destructive, damaging policy, it was an inhumane policy. And so, basically you had to go through a process, and we got our staff to work this of basically figuring out, boom, okay, this is something he has said or the administration's done. Do we need to respond? And if we do need to respond, what type of response do we need to have? And that was a process that literally was daily, was weekly, was all the time. And literally it was a reaction that you had to do. And so you had to get to a point where it's like, you know what? You have to figure out a way to ignore a lot of this and just do our damn job.
Sounds exhausting.
It was. No, it was definitely exhausting. And so now, with a president who understands what it means to get things done, a president who understands that, Congress, politics, government is actually kind of boring when you get stuff done, to be frank. It's a big relief because there isn't as many people calling and yelling, understandably so as it was, but it's more about, what is going on and how is government actually helping me? And let me tell you, with the passage of the American Rescue Plan and what I've experienced in these last 2 weeks in the district, when I've had some good solid time in the district, we're actually doing things that are affecting people's lives, putting shots in arms, putting checks in pockets, getting kids back in school safely, helping businesses and employees get back to work and get back open. You're seeing the state and local funding that's coming into these cities and counties that are getting direct injections of huge amounts of money that will help them recover from what they lost over the past year. We're doing things. We're actually making government work for people. And let me tell you, it is fun. It's exactly like my father said. It's fun when you get stuff done. And I look forward to continuing to do it this term with this Senate, with my House majority, and yes, with Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris as Vice President.
One more question about Washington, and then we'll get into some of the issues that we want to discuss with you. I really want to talk to you about January 6th. It seems like that was a turning point, certainly in U.S. history, in the history of the Congress. You had spoken to our staff and others about where you were that day. We have, 3 months ago now, and there's almost 400 people that have been charged and indicted for what was essentially an insurrection. I'm curious, you're thinking about January 6th, how it has evolved since it happened. Do you feel more inclined that we almost lost something really precious, or was it not quite as dramatic as perhaps we saw on TV? Have you had any revelations about it since it happened?
No, it was absolutely as dramatic and then some as you saw on TV, on the videos that have been replayed over and over and over again. It was worse than that, unfortunately. I myself was not in the Capitol. I was not on the floor. I was in my office, as we were told to be in our office. And I had actually had constituent meetings that I had to do. We actually were in the middle of a Zoom call about vaccines. If you remember back in January, people weren't too happy about the vaccine distribution. So we were having a Zoom as to how we could make it better or try to make it better. And I received this loud banging on my door. And, I admit, I thought it was my colleague across the hall who likes to play jokes on me. And I thought it was him. But it turns out then there was a banging on the main office door, and it was the police telling us to evacuate because a bomb had been found less than 100 yards away by the Republican National Committee. It was a pipe bomb. I knew that at the time. And so my staff was there. I sent my staff home. I had to finish my Zoom call. I had a job to do, and I wanted to continue doing that. My first reaction as we started to see things develop on TV was not fear, because I really didn't think that those yahoos would find 406 Cannon, to be honest with you, on the 4th floor of the Cannon building where my office is. It was really anger. Why is this happening? How is this happening? And where the hell is the president to stop this from happening? And so that was my first really frustration, and was just literally overcome to tears with anger. This shouldn't be happening in our country. And obviously you have some self-reflection as to why I became that emotional. And it was professional, as I talked about, like, why is this happening to our work? What is going on here? Why are they attacking the cathedral of democracy? But it was personal as well. Because I think, as you know, Wallace, if you go to Washington, D.C. and you see the United States Capitol, at least when I do every single day, my heart swells. There's that connection to it. And so, and this kind of this took place a few times, a few weeks, like about a week after, when I kind of had time to formulate what was going on. And it was personal to me because I watched that video where that rider, that mob, where that one of those mob got shot in the speaker's lobby right outside the Capitol. And I can tell you what immediately hit once I saw that video and realized where that shooting took place. I realized, oh my God, that was one of my first impressions of Washington, D.C., because I was visiting my dad back in the summer of 1977, and I met Tip O'Neill, the Lion of Congress, right there in that same spot. And that was my kind of connection, was my personal connection. But I got to tell you, what really kind of made me proud in my self-reflection was back on that day, after I was angry, it was a feeling of, oh, they're not going to stop us from doing our job. We got to get them out of that Capitol, and we got to get right back on that very same floor they tried to take over. And you know what? We did that. We cleared them out. We got back on the House floor. This time I went to the House floor at 8 p.m. that night. I stayed there the entire evening until 3:44 in the morning when we actually certified the election. And that's why we have President Biden at this point, because we did our job. No matter the threat, no matter the intimidation, we did our damn job. And that's what makes me most proud about that day, as destructive and devastating and overwhelming emotionally that it really was. Let me tell you, people got to realize that despite what we saw on TV, we did our job. We certified that Electoral College, and that's why we're in the position that we are today.
What about since then? How has that event kind of morphed in your mind? I think a lot of people think that we almost avoided something that could have been really bad. I mean, violence against members, assassinations even. I mean, how do you...
Look, it's funny. Someone posed this question to me the other day. They said, what do you think would have happened if Speaker Pelosi was in her office? And you can only have imagined, based on what we saw through the videos and some of those people who stormed the Capitol in that insurrection, what would have happened. So you're right. I mean, it really makes you think through what would have happened that day. But it also makes you realize the fragility of self-governance, that when it comes to our American exceptionalism, like we like to think we have, it takes a hell of a lot of work. And what I've come to appreciate and realize is that if you're going to be in the position to govern, no matter what level, to be frank, you really got to be of good faith and to have a good soul. And when I say good faith, I don't mean religion. I just mean faith in why you're in that job. Are you in it to serve yourself? Are you in it to serve people? And for me, it's the latter. For many of my colleagues, it's the latter. That's why I love the job. One of the reasons I love the job is because of the people I work with. There's a lot of good-souled, good faith people in Congress, I'm telling you. And they're there for the right reasons. And it takes that type of people to be in those types of positions. And we've seen what happens when we don't have that type of person in such a position.
Earlier this week, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia said that January 6th changed him. And he felt that he had to be more bipartisan. And I'm curious to the degree that members and staff on Capitol Hill talk about January 6th, think about it. What is the presence of January 6th today in that workplace?
Really good question. Like I said, for me, it motivates me because I saw that even on the day of an insurrection, we did our job and we got stuff done. We can legislate when we come together and do what's right, okay, despite things like that, okay? But obviously, the question that you're getting at, and it's an understandable question, it's a question that we've been dealing with ever since January 6th of where are we going to go when we have to work with people that even after the insurrection voted to object to the Electoral College? Okay. And there, I have yet to find a legitimate answer, I should say. It'd be easy to say, I'm not working with those 140 so members. I'm not doing that. And you can just get in your trenches and that's that. And be kind of what I said of being that average Congress member. Okay. To me, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of a number of bipartisan caucuses, like I said, where 3 of them, to be frank, and where each of those caucuses, we've asked that question to our Republican colleagues of why did you do it? How do you think, and basically expressing how we feel about how disgusted we were in that vote and why they did it. And they obviously gave their reasons, okay? And you realize that there's no excuse. I'll never give an excuse for that type of vote or those types of actions. But at least I have a better understanding of the Republicans who voted to object. Now, there are Republicans who voted to object who I never worked with before the insurrection, and I'll never work with after the insurrection. We just can't, they're just from different places and they're not willing to work together. And that's fine, okay? But there are those members who are part of these caucuses who are willing to have those types of meaningful conversations that allow us to have empathy and trust for one another, who I worked with before and I will work with after. Because I do believe that we have to continue to get things done for people. And that is what our democracy is about. And so it's a completely understandable question. I can't give you an answer because I have yet to find the solid, legitimate answer as to, what are we going to do going forward? But my attitude is I'm there to get things done for the people of the Central Coast, and I will work with anybody as long as it means that we're going to benefit and promote and fight for and further the values and the people of the Central Coast.
Let me ask you a little bit about some of the things going on in the Central Coast. I think the big issue over the past year hasn't been COVID, it's been wildfires. Especially in our district, we suffered, as you know, a devastating CZU fire complex last year in Santa Cruz County. And it's disconcerting, I think, for just about everybody in this district to think that fire season is this thing that is going to have to be part of our lives going forward. We're in April now, we're kind of in the middle of it, but it's coming up again. How do you view it? Do you think that this is something that is inevitable? And what are kind of the long-term implications of living with a fire season every year? Is this a new reality that we're just gonna have to get used to?
I believe it is. I believe that we no longer have fire seasons. It's not a season. It's constant. I mean, you look at the weather today, you look at the weather this month, you look at the weather last month. You look at the wildfires that started in the brush fires that started in the Santa Cruz Mountains this week or last week, the fires that are starting along, the freeways that we're hearing about up in the Bay Area. This is an issue that we're going to have to constantly deal with. Like you said, I wish I could give you another answer, but it's not. And therefore, I believe at the federal level, dealing with the federal forest land, we have to do something to not just constantly suppress, we have to do something to prevent wildfires. Look, amongst all, like I say, last year, 2020 was the 5 E's for me, for all of us. It was the epidemic, it was the economy and the shutdowns, it was the equality fights, it was the election, and yes, it was the environment with the climate crisis and of course the wildfires. We had in this area, in my district, I had 5 major fires that were in or affected the Central Coast, and that burned 650,000 acres. Okay, this is something that unfortunately we're going to have to deal with, and that's why that's why last year, in the latter part of last year, I introduced 3 bills that I believe will help prevent wildfires on our forest lands. The first one is the Replant Act, which basically goes to alleviating the backlog in the reforestation projects that we have throughout our federal forests. Unfortunately, there's actually a cap, and I'm not going to go into this, but there's a cap on how much we can spend on reforestation projects. I want to get rid of that cap because we need to replant more trees. I mean, we saw what can happen in burn scar areas down on Highway 1 with the Rat Creek washout recently, in which the ground, literally crustaceans over, gets crusty and forms a solid base. The water just runs right off it and doesn't slow down, doesn't permeate the ground. And that's the type of damage that can happen when it does rain. So we need to start replanting on these federal forest lands. The second bill I introduced with Senator Dianne Feinstein, and we're going to reintroduce it this year, is the Emergency Wildfire Safety Act. That actually talks about ways how we can get in and deal with making sure that a lot of the dead and dying brush and fuel that's in our federal forests can be removed in an environmentally safe and friendly way. And so we're having a number of discussions right now with stakeholders, senators and Congress members to ensure that that bill is formulated and put together right. We're going to be introducing that soon. And then I was just on my Big Sur multi-agency meeting today, in which a number of stakeholders down in Big Sur who deal with the Los Padres National Forest are talking about, unfortunately, the number one cause of wildfires, especially in federal forests, are what? Are humans. 80% of the wildfires caused are by humans in federal lands. And therefore, we need more enforcement and we need more Forest Service personnel. And so I introduced the Save Our Forest Act, which invests in Forest Service personnel and those Forest Service personnel that can actually enforce the laws as well. And so, I'm working to play my part at the federal level, but obviously it's going to take all levels. And we're fortunate to have a representative here in Sacramento who knows really well what to do. Senator John Laird, obviously the former Secretary of Natural Resources of California. And so I look forward to working with him going forward to make sure that, like I said, that we do stuff not just to react and to suppress, but try to prevent our wildfires, especially during our wildfire years.
Well, part of the vulnerability, I think, particularly homeowners feel during this kind of fire season is obviously the fire itself, but the fact that fire insurance continues to go up to almost unaffordable levels. Does the federal government have a role in helping us protect ourselves against that?
Yeah.
That could even
look. Yeah, that's mostly a state issue. And that's why I had Ricardo Lara come down here, the insurance commissioner of California, and conduct a town hall down here on the Central Coast to talk about some of these insurance issues. Look, I'm in an area where I guarantee you, I had a certain insurance company in my previous house. We moved out to my home where I grew up out in Carmel Valley. And that insurance agency said, no, we're not insuring you anymore. And so I had to fortunately go to a friend who runs a insurance firm. And that's the only way I was able to get insured out here because of the area I live in. And that's happening more and more and more. And so Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara understands that. Senator John Laird understands that. He's actually going to be having another town hall with Insurance Commissioner Lara coming up here. And so it's basically continuing to have these discussions so that we prevent, or we hopefully have a way that these insurance companies can't do that. And look, and what it comes down to, obviously, in the big picture, it's about dealing with the effects of climate change. I think you know that. I think many of the listeners or the viewers, however they're tuning in, understand that. And that's why I'm so excited for this infrastructure package coming up here, because you're going to see a major cornerstone of that package is pivoting to not just greening our energy, but greening our transportation as well, so that we can reduce the effects that are a lot of the causes of these wildfires, as we know. And so it's something that should have been done a hell of a long time ago. But fortunately, we have a president, we have a Senate, and we have a House of Representatives, including myself, that are willing to actually do something about it.
I'm glad you brought up infrastructure. That was my next kind of area to ask you about. The Biden administration's enormous new infrastructure plan. I wanted to give you a chance to talk about the Pajaro Valley Levee project. That, of course, those of us who were around in 1994, we remember the failure of that. And that I think it goes down to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, how it simply failed. You've been trying to fix that. I think there is you have secured funding for the design phase of the project, if I have that right. Does the Biden administration's new infrastructure plan mean that that particular project might get funded in terms of construction?
We sure as hell hope so. I know better to make any promises when it comes to funding out of the federal government, but obviously that's going to be done through the appropriations process that will hopefully be included in such a package. But it's not going to be like there will be a certain section in that bill that says Pajaro River Flood Management Project is going to be funded. Okay, that's not how it works. But there will be funding put forward for these types of projects, and then in the appropriations process in Congress, we will continue to ensure and fight for the necessary funding. Now, construction is still a little ways away, so any sort of funding won't be for construction will not be allocated this year. Probably won't be allocated next year, because the PED that you just talked about, that planning phase still has to get done. That's why we were so fortunate to fight for and get the funding for the project planning, which was so important. And let me tell you, yes, this project has been going on for a long time. But man, over these last few years, the partnership that really has developed and sort of gelled when it comes to the cities, the counties, the state, and the federal government, including the Army Corps of Engineers. I gotta say, I almost feel like they're partners in this project, not enemies of this project, are actually doing a really good job. I was just on a call this week. We do a weekly call with the Army Corps just to see where everything is going. And it's a partnership that has really pushed this along. And having partners like Supervisor Zach Friend, Mark Strudley of the county there in Santa Cruz, they've just been kicking butt when it comes to this. And I'm just they're playing their part. I'm playing my part at the federal level to make sure the Army Corps of Engineers plays its part by making sure they have the money necessary to start planning the construction, and then hopefully crossing that bridge of actually paying for that construction coming up here. And yes, the fact that you have a huge infrastructure investment package, you hope that eventually through the appropriations process, you're going to see funding for construction as well. But we're just at the starting line. Okay, I can't stress this enough. The race is yet to be run at this point in order for that construction project to continue. But as we've seen, as we've learned, and as we will continue to do, we're going to keep on grinding away, keep the pressure on the bureaucracy to make sure it gets done.
Are there other big infrastructure projects in the district that are going to be implicated by this?
Look, yeah, no, look, I'm not going to start picking off specific projects, but what I can tell you is that this bill is so needed. Yes, on the Central Coast, but as we know, throughout this country. I mean, there's just been decades and decades of underinvestment in our infrastructure and basic research and development, to be frank. And so what we're seeing is sort of once again, a generational type bill that actually, kind of refocuses where infrastructure can go. Because what we've seen in the past couple of decades, we've seen infrastructure investment, but it's gone to urban areas and it hasn't really gone to rural areas like ours. Yes, I consider our area a rural area. And so hopefully this sort of changes that. This sort of basically refocuses and rebalances our society when it comes to investment in infrastructure. And this is a bill that yes, it's about roads and bridges and planes and trains and so forth, okay? But it's a little outside the box in that this thinking the thinking that I believe this administration and we in Congress, especially on the Ways and Means Committee, have about this infrastructure bill is that infrastructure, when you say infrastructure, it's not just about the things I said. It's about affordable housing. It's about hospitals. It's about schools. It's about basically other ways in which people can succeed, not just getting to their jobs, okay, but actually making sure that they can succeed every day with everyday challenges that we sometimes take for granted, and we shouldn't, especially with the lack of investment that's been going on in those types of areas. And then, of course, like I said, one of the foundations, one of the cornerstones is going to be making sure that we start tackling the effects of climate change and actually start producing incentives, really hardcore incentives to get people to change the way they do things.
Congressman, let me ask you about COVID a little bit in terms of our economic recovery from the pandemic. We are coming out of it. And I wanted to focus on women for a minute, if I could. Before the pandemic, women were making great strides in the US, generally speaking, in terms of they held actually most of the jobs in the US. They had most of the college degrees. They were making strides. I have heard the term she-cession associated with the pandemic, and women in particular, because domestic duties often still fall to women. Often they are not as well paid as their husbands. They are the ones who usually have to lose their jobs or get out of the workforce in order to do family things. And of course, with no childcare and the education mess we've had, it's been very, very difficult for women in particular. And I'm curious if you could comment a little bit about any kind of role the federal government might play in terms of helping women get back to where they were before all this happened.
Yeah, I think, it's an excellent statement that you made. Completely agree with you. Obviously saying women being affected by the pandemic. But let me just kind of lay a foundation here before I start boring you with the legislation that we passed. I think when you look at the American Rescue Plan, what we just passed a few weeks ago, it really was a generational piece of legislation. Yes, because of the funding that it provided to do everything that I talked about earlier to fix COVID and fix the economy. But we also were able to throw a couple things in there that I would term that bill, as transformational. And what I mean by that is you're going to see the lowest 1/5 incomes increase by 20% because of that bill. You're going to see child poverty cut in half because of that bill. You're going to see a qualifying family of 4 get offered $10,000 in benefits because of that bill. Now, look, we didn't do it through socialism, as some people would like to say. We didn't do it by taking over the economy. We didn't do it by restraining corporate power. We did it just by transferring money to where it should go, to be honest with you. And by addressing, and yes, we did it through debt financing. And yes, we did it because of the low interest rates that are there that hopefully will not affect inflation, as we've seen as a trend. But we basically did it because we had to address the lack of opportunity, the security, and the precarity that has been felt by so many people, yes, including and especially women, over the past year. And one of the ways that we were able to do this, and if I can talk to you about it, is basically through certain elements that we put into the bill. Now, obviously, I talked about the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. The earned income tax credit is something that I'm a big champion of, because basically I think that's the way that you promote work. And you basically say that no matter what type of job you have and no matter what amount you're making, you get a tax break if you're working. And so that's an important thing that I believe we're going to continue to push forward. But we also focused on child care and development block grants, which is put in 13.5 billion in supplemental appropriations to do that. We also basically put in this thing, a bill called the Helps Families Access Quality Child Care Act that provides fully refundable child and dependent care tax credit for up to 50% of the first $16,000 spent on child care, which around here can be met like that, unfortunately. And then, like I said, we put in that child tax credit for low and middle income families to basically invest in alleviating child poverty by increasing the CTC to $3,000 per child, $3,600 for children under 6 years old, and it makes the credit fully refundable for families who make too little to receive the full credit. And then the American Rescue Plan allocated $24 billion in grants to child care providers to use payroll, rent, personal protective equipment, mental health support, and other needs on top of that. And then there's also the Child Care and Development Block Grant. I told you you'd start to get a little bored by this, but let me tell you, it's the stuff that's helping. The Child Care and Development Block Grants, you're going to receive $15 billion, and on top of funding child care entitlement to states with programs that subsidize child care for low-income families. So there's a number of things that we're putting in there to help women, to help child care at home. But also, we're going to be basically voting on the equal pay for equal work coming up here to make sure that women get paid just as much as men. We're going to take that vote in the House of Representatives in the next month. So there's a number of bills on top of the American Rescue Plan that we're focused on subsequent to the ARP that we're going to be doing to make sure that women are made whole as they should be.
I have talked to a lot of small businesses over the last year, and I've heard from some of them. I've heard this actually more often than I expected I would, but a lot of small businesses are now debt-ridden to the degree that they weren't before. They have had to take out a lot of loans. They've paid, they don't have a rainy day fund anymore. And a lot of them believe that we're going to see a kind of second wave of closures as we recover here. Is that something you anticipate? And is that something that that the federal government can help with?
Yeah, well, look, I think, look, one of the frustrating things about this pandemic is that people, like I said, people have never really felt in control, unfortunately, with a number of things. And we felt like we're constantly trying to catch up to this dang thing. And as I say, we felt like we weren't taming this tiger. We were just riding this tiger. But I can tell you the feeling that I'm getting, and I do believe this, is that right now we're sort of neck and neck in this race between injections and infections. And I feel like people are like, we're right there. And the more vaccines and the more people take the vaccines, and the more people play their part in this, and that means the federal government and the state government and the county government, making sure that vaccines get in people's arms and actually people go and get vaccinated and people still wear masks. I believe we're going to win that race, and people are feeling like we're going to win that race right now. And if we can do that, that means that basically the economy can open up. I think we saw that basically in the tier levels going from red to orange, red to purple to orange right now. I think those are the tiers. But I know we're in orange right now because people have been vaccinated, because they're seeing the injection rates slow down. And what we're seeing is that, yes, the variants are taking effect, but though they're taking effect in people who haven't been vaccinated. So if we can just get more vaccinated, we can basically make sure that we stay open and that businesses reopen. Now, look, the way that we were able to keep our economy afloat during the pandemic, the way that we were able to keep the poverty rate flat during the pandemic was, yes, because of the relief packages that we passed. Not just the ARP that I mentioned, but the 5 relief packages in last year that totaled close to $4 trillion, okay? Now, part of those packages, as many of the small business owners that you talk to know, was the Paycheck Protection Plan, because many businesses here on the Central Coast, in fact, 8,833 small businesses took advantage of the PPP, which affected over 80,000 jobs here on the Central Coast. So in this we knew how beneficial that was. Now, don't get me wrong, it was kind of a pain in the butt at first, and our office helped and will continue to help any businesses that's having trouble applying for the PPP, okay? Know that. But we got better at it, and we actually made sure that the PPP went to those businesses that needed the most, minority, smaller businesses that really didn't have those relationships with the big banks that were giving out those loans. And so we adjusted the legislation, we extended it, we expanded it. And so more businesses can apply and have access to that PPP, not just through the legislation last year, but even the American Rescue Plan. So if it does come to the fact that there is a second shutdown, if people don't get their dang vaccines, then know that the PPP will be there. The federal government will be there as it should be there in times like this.
We don't have a ton of time. I wanted to ask you quickly about immigration. If there is a difference in the administrations that is more stark, I don't know what it is, in the realm of immigration and the Dreamers in particular. I'm wondering if you think that the current House bill regarding DACA and the Dreamers is the beginning of I don't know, a new era for those particular people. Is this the beginning of them getting back to citizenship? I mean,
let me tell you, Wallace, in my limited time in Congress, immigration, I've leaned into immigration, obviously being the grandson of immigrants, who you can see right over my right shoulder, but also growing up here on the Central Coast, living, working, serving on the Central Coast. I've leaned into immigration because we value immigration. We value immigrants. We value what they bring, not just to our economy, but to our communities and to our culture and who we are, our identity. And so even though I'm not on Judiciary Committee, I've leaned into this because it's important. And I've worked hard, yes, on HR 6, the Dream and the Promise Act, but I've also worked hard on the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which provides an earned pathway to citizenship for those that have meant so much to our community and to our food security, our farm workers. And in fact, because we were able to formulate this bill over 9 months, where Democrats, Republicans, farmers, and farm workers were literally at the table grinding out this legislation, we were able to have a bill that passed recently out of the House of Representatives. That was the most bipartisan bill on immigration that has passed out of the House of Representatives in the past 20 years. What will happen to those two bills that you talked about? Well, I brought up the Farm Workforce Modernization Act and the Dream Act, Dream and Promise Act, dealing with TPS recipients as well, by the way, which we have a lot of here on the Central Coast. What will happen to that in the Senate? I don't know the answer to that. It's tough because immigration is the most politically complicated and policy complex issue that I've dealt with in my limited time in Congress. So I do know that there are members of Congress on both sides of the aisle that are willing to take the time to formulate legitimate working pieces of legislation. But I also know, as we know when we turn on the TV, that there are those politicians who are using immigrants as scapegoats and using this issue as a scapegoat to get reelected, unfortunately. We have to find a way to get around them. We have to find a way to get around those senators that have a hard time doing anything for immigrants, unfortunately. What will that entail? Well, look, it may entail a lot of work by people like, Senator Padilla, Dianne Feinstein, and hopefully other senators across this country, including hopefully a couple of Republican senators, to do it. If not, I could see immigration possibly being, at least some of the discussions now, are possibly being included in the reconciliation bill. And the way it's able to be included in reconciliation is that we know, especially here on the Central Coast, how much immigrants contribute to our tax base, okay? They pay a heck of a lot of taxes, but the undocumented immigrants don't get any of the benefits, including, I think they found there was one study that showed that across this country, undocumented immigrants contribute $11 billion to our tax base, okay? $11 billion, yet they're not taking anything out because they're not eligible for benefits. So that's how you can work it into the reconciliation, which only deals with our budget. Look, these are the types of finagling that we got to do. It's unfortunate that you don't have people in the Senate that are willing to work on immigration like I did, like my Republican colleagues that I worked with in the House of Representatives did. But that's kind of the magic that we got to come up with, unfortunately, to do something that's so right for people that are so deserving of it.
Congressman, we're running out of time, so I wanted to kind of end with maybe a personal question to you. All of us are experiencing a reawakening, a recovery, coming out into the world we remember before 2020. And I'm wondering, and keep in mind, you're talking to a Santa Cruz County audience here. I'm wondering if there's anything in the district that you're looking forward to that you haven't done in a long time that you can do again and feel like a normal human being again. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I got to admit, I grew up going to our fairs. And what I mean by that, and just wasn't limited to the Monterey County Fair, in that I got dragged along as a kid with my father having to go visit the Salinas Valley Fair, the Monterey County Fair, and yes, the Santa Cruz County Fair. And that's something that those types of fairs, not just the county fairs, but the local fairs that highlight what we have here as a community, have all been shut down, unfortunately. And what you realize is that it doesn't just provide, a shot in the arm to the local economy when we have those types of events. It really is a way in which we can come together as a community and highlight what we have here as a community. Yes, in Santa Cruz County, but also throughout the Central Coast. So it's also, let me just kind of give a little shout out. We're going to introduce an Agricultural Fairs Act that basically provides relief funding for fairs that have been shut down throughout the country. I introduced that bipartisan legislation that hopefully can get passed. But also that's what I look forward to doing, making sure that we can get out to those events, not just fairs, but all of those events that highlight how special we are here on the Central Coast and all of our unique features that we have here on the Central Coast, and just enjoying not just what they have to offer, but enjoying that time when we can kind of come together as a community and be proud of what we have here on the Central Coast. I also got to admit, I can't wait to have time, and I don't know if I'll have time to do this, but one of the best things that I can remember is on a Saturday afternoon after I've hit throughout the district, done my events throughout the district, to find where my daughter is playing softball and go and kind of just sit there and gel out and watch my daughter play softball, which I haven't been able to. So I can't wait to watch my daughter play sports. I can't wait to get out and about in the community at those fairs. And I can't wait to see all of you in person, let me tell you.
It's coming, Jimmy. It's coming. It's just right around the corner.
I agree. I agree.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time. There's a lot of subjects we didn't get to, but I know your time is precious. Thank you so much for visiting with us and connecting with your Santa Cruz County constituents. I really appreciate your time.
You bet. Thanks, Wallace. Thanks to Lookout. Thanks, Robert. Thanks to Kaiser Permanente. And I appreciate the intro, Sam. And thanks to all of you. I think you're right. I think there is that sense of control we're starting to feel, and we can't wait. And we're bursting. And I look forward to being a part of that bursting.
Robert, back to you.
Honestly, that was the best outro we could ask for, Jimmy. On that note, I just wish everyone a happy Friday. Go and enjoy the last little bits of Santa Cruz and Central Coast sunshine. And thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. Thanks again, Jimmy. Thanks again, Wallace. Have a good one all.